My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stood in the middle of my father's living room, 32 pairs of eyes burning into me like spotlights. The champagne glasses had stopped clinking. The polite laughter from moments ago evaporated into thick, suffocating silence. "You will stand there," my father said, his voice steady and cold as November rain in Vancouver, "until you apologize to your brother for trying to sabotage his engagement announcement." I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply asked Devon's fiancée, Rebecca, if she knew about the 3 other women he'd been seeing. Apparently, honesty was sabotage in the Morrison family. My father, Robert Morrison, former Chief Justice of the BC Supreme Court, current family tyrant, stood with his arms crossed, waiting. My mother, Patricia, looked away, studying her manicured nails like they held the secrets of the universe. My brother Devon, golden child extraordinaire, corporate lawyer, Dad's pride and joy, smirked from behind his crystal tumbler of scotch. This was Thanksgiving dinner. I was 30 years old. "Dad," I said quietly, "I'm not apologizing for telling the truth." His face darkened. "Then you're not welcome in this house. In fact, you're grounded until you learn some respect." Someone laughed. I think it was my Aunt Carol. Others joined in, nervous little sounds that felt like wasps stinging my skin. "I'm 30, I whispered. "And you're acting like you're 13, he shot back. "Go to your old room upstairs. Think about what you've done. You're not leaving until you apologize to Devon properly, in front of everyone." The humiliation hit me like a physical force. My pulse hammered in my teeth. My face burned so hot, I thought my skin might actually catch fire. But I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. Just a flicker of it, hidden behind all that authority and bluster. I nodded once. "All right." I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom, the one I hadn't slept in for 12 years, and closed the door. Then I pulled out my phone. 20 minutes later, I walked back down with my purse, my coat, and my car keys. My father was holding court in the living room, Devon beside him like a prince at his throne. Everyone was pretending the last 20 minutes hadn't happened, refilling glasses, laughing too loud. "Where do you think you're going?" Dad's voice cracked across the room. I didn't stop walking. "I'm 30 years old, Dad. You can't ground me." I walked out. Nobody followed. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 6:45. "Dad," calling from the house phone. I let it ring. At 7:15, he called again. Then Devon called. Then Mom sent a text. "Your father wants to talk to you. Please come home." Home. As if that house had ever been home. At 8:30, there was a knock on my apartment door. I lived in a tiny one-bedroom in Kitsilano, 450 square feet of freedom I'd scraped together on my graphic designer salary. I looked through the peephole. Dad stood there in his weekend casuals, expensive jeans, cashmere sweater, the uniform of wealthy Vancouver retirees. His face was red. I opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "Have you learned your lesson?" he asked. No hello, no apology, just condescension dripping from every syllable. "What lesson would that be? That you don't embarrass this family. That you don't speak out of turn. That you respect your elders." I studied him through the gap in the door. This was the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd come to exactly 3 of my high school art shows, who'd told me at my university graduation that graphic design was a hobby, not a career. This was the man who'd told Devon he was brilliant before Devon could even talk. "I'm not coming back to apologize, Dad." His jaw clenched. "Then you're not part of this family anymore. Effective immediately. Don't expect to be included in any family events. Don't expect any support. And certainly don't expect anything when your mother and I are gone." "Understood," I said, and closed the door. I pressed my back against it and slid down to the floor, shaking. Free, terrified, relieved, destroyed. My phone rang again. I almost ignored it, but the number wasn't familiar. Toronto area code. "Hello? Is this Emma Morrison?" A woman's voice, professional, warm. "Yes. My name is Dr. Lillian Chen. I was your Uncle Thomas's lawyer. I'm calling about his estate." The floor seemed to tilt. Uncle Thomas, Dad's younger brother, The one who'd been erased from family photos, whose name was never mentioned, who'd chosen art over law and been disowned for it. He'd died 6 months ago from pancreatic cancer. I'd found out through a mutual friend on Facebook. I'd gone to the funeral alone. Dad had forbidden the family from attending. Okay, I managed. I know this is sudden, but I need to meet with you as soon as possible. There are some urgent matters regarding your uncle's will that require your immediate attention. Can you come to my office in Toronto? I'll cover all travel expenses. Is something wrong? Quite the opposite, Miss Morrison. But this conversation needs to happen in person, and it needs to happen soon. Your father has been making inquiries. My stomach dropped. What kind of inquiries? The kind that suggest he doesn't know what your uncle put in place. And we need to keep it that way until everything is finalized. Can you fly out tomorrow? I looked around my tiny apartment, at the graphic design projects scattered across my desk, at the life I'd built with no help from Robert Morrison. Yes, I can do tomorrow. Excellent. I'll email you the details within the hour. And Miss Morrison? Don't tell your father about this call. The line went dead. I sat on my floor, holding my phone, trying to process. Uncle Thomas had left me something important enough to fly me across the country. Something my father was trying to find out about. I thought about the last time I'd seen Uncle Thomas, 3 years ago, at a coffee shop in Gastown. He'd been thin even then, his eyes too bright, his hands shaking slightly as he held his mug. We'd met in secret, the way we always did, because acknowledging Uncle Thomas's existence was forbidden in the Morrison household. Your father is afraid, he'd told me that day. He's always been afraid. Of mess. Of unpredictability. Of anything he can't control. What's he afraid of with you? I'd asked. That I'm happy. That I chose freedom over his approval and didn't regret it. He'd smiled, sad and knowing. You remind him of me, Emma. That's why he's harder on you. I'd thought about that conversation 1,000 times since. Now, walking through Toronto's Pearson Airport with my overnight bag, I thought about it again. Dr. Chen's office was in a glass tower downtown, the kind of building that screamed old money and power. She was a small woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes behind elegant glasses and a handshake that meant business. Thank you for coming so quickly, she said, gesturing me into her office. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm okay. I just need to understand what's happening. She nodded, sat behind her desk, and pulled out a thick file. Your Uncle Thomas was a very deliberate man. He spent the last 8 years of his life putting something together for you. Something your father doesn't know about and cannot touch. What kind of something? An irrevocable trust. Established in 2018, naming you as the sole beneficiary. It includes his art studio in Leslieville, his investment portfolio, and something particularly interesting, a 30% ownership stake in Morrison Holdings. I blinked. What? Your grandfather, William Morrison, gave each of his sons 30% of the family commercial real estate business when he died. Your father got 30%. Thomas got 30%. Your Uncle Harold got 30%. The remaining 10% went to your grandmother. Your father has been operating as CEO under the assumption that Thomas's shares reverted to the company upon his death, or would be divided among remaining family members. But they didn't? They didn't. Thomas put them in an irrevocable trust with you as beneficiary, 7 years before he died. Your father has no claim to them, neither does Devon. The room spun. 30% of Morrison Holdings? Currently valued at approximately $8.4 million. But that's not all. She slid a folder across the desk. Your uncle spent years documenting your father's financial mismanagement of the company. Questionable transactions. Money moved into personal accounts. Contracts awarded to friends without proper bidding processes. Nothing technically illegal, but ethically questionable enough that the board would have serious concerns. Thomas kept every receipt, every email, every bank statement. I stared at the folder like it might explode. Why are you showing me this? Because your father filed a petition last week claiming Thomas was mentally incompetent when he created the trust. He's arguing it should be invalidated. He's using his position as a former judge to intimidate people into supporting his claim. Your brother Devin is representing him, using his legal credentials to give the petition weight. The betrayal shouldn't have surprised me. But it did. It hollowed me out. Uncle Thomas left you something else, Dr. Chen said quietly. She pulled an envelope from the file, handwritten, my name on the front in Uncle Thomas's messy scrawl. He asked me to give you this in person. My hands shook as I took it. I opened it slowly. Dear Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and your father is probably trying to take what I left you. I expected nothing less from Robert. I want you to know something. You were never the problem. You were never too sensitive, too emotional, too creative, too much of anything. You were perfect, exactly as you were. The problem was a family that needed a scapegoat, and you were kind enough to volunteer. I gave you my shares in Morrison Holdings, not because I wanted you to have money, though I hope it helps, but because I wanted you to have power. Power your father can't take away. Power to make choices. Power to walk away if you want to. Or power to burn it all down if that's what you need. I also left you 8 years of evidence about what your father's really been doing with the family business. Use it or don't, that's entirely up to you. The studio is yours. Create fearlessly. Make messes. Make mistakes. Make art that scares you. And remember, the people who try to dim your light are the ones terrified of their own darkness. Love always, Uncle Thomas. P.S. I was never confused or incompetent, and Lillian has 8 years of medical records proving it. Your father's petition is a waste of everyone's time, but it'll be fun watching him realize he can't bully his way out of this one. I read it 3 times, tears sliding down my face, before I could look up at Dr. Chen. He was very clear about his wishes, she said gently, and very clear that you might need time to decide what to do with all this. The trust is ironclad. Your father can't break it, but he can make noise. He can try to intimidate you. He can make this ugly. What do I need to do? That's up to you. We can keep this quiet, let your father's petition die in court, and you take ownership of your shares peacefully. Or we can fight back. File counterclaims. Expose the financial irregularities. Make it very clear to the Morrison Holdings board that your father has been running the company like his personal piggy bank. Your 30% gives you enough voting power to force a board review. I thought about Thanksgiving dinner, about 30 pairs of eyes, about being grounded at 30 years old, about a lifetime of being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't serious enough, wasn't Morrison enough. How long do I have to decide? The hearing on your father's petition is in 3 weeks. We need to respond before then. I nodded slowly. Can I see the studio? Uncle Thomas's studio? Dr. Chen smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. The studio was in a converted warehouse in Leslieville, all exposed brick and massive windows, letting in cold December light. It smelled like turpentine and coffee and something else. Something I remembered from childhood before Dad decided art was frivolous. Hope, maybe. Or permission. Canvases covered every wall. Abstract explosions of color. Quiet landscapes. Portraits of people I didn't recognize. All of them painted with such tenderness it hurt to look at. In the corner sat an easel with a half-finished painting of a young woman sitting by a window, light pooling in her dark hair. It took me a moment to recognize myself. He was working on that the week before he died, Dr. Chen said quietly behind me. He said you were his favorite subject, that you had what he called light in the bones, whatever that means. I walked closer. The painting wasn't realistic, it was impressionistic, soft-edged, capturing something more than features. It captured how I felt when I was alone, when nobody was watching, when I could just be. Not Morrison enough. Not Devin's inferior little sister. Just Emma. Just me. I want to fight, I said. I want to use everything Uncle Thomas left me. The shares. The evidence. All of it. Dr. Chen nodded, like she'd been expecting this. Then we'll need to move fast. Your father isn't going to take this well. I know. He'll make it personal. He'll try to turn your family against you. Your mother, cousins, everyone. They already chose Devin a long time ago. I've got nothing to lose. That was a lie. I had everything to lose. The fantasy that maybe, someday, my father would see me, really see me, approve of me, love me the way he loved Devon. But Uncle Thomas was right. Some fantasies needed to die so real life could begin. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal documents, strategy sessions, and sleepless nights. Dr. Chen was brilliant, methodical, building our case brick by brick. We had medical records proving Uncle Thomas was completely competent right up until the end. We had the trust documents, notarized, witnessed, ironclad. We had the evidence of Dad's financial games with Morrison Holdings, nothing criminal, but enough to make the board very, very nervous. My father called 6 times. I didn't answer. Devon texted, "You're making a huge mistake. Dad's just trying to protect you from yourself." I blocked his number. My mother left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't you. You're not a fighter. You're my sweet, creative girl. Please come home so we can fix this." I deleted it without responding. The hearing was scheduled for December 20th. Winter solstice. The longest night of the year. Fitting. Dr. Chen called 3 days before. "Your father's legal team requested a family mediation session instead of going to court. They want to settle this privately." What does that mean? It means they know they're going to lose, and they want to avoid public humiliation. They'll probably offer you a settlement cash to walk away from the shares, an NDA to keep quiet about the financial irregularities. I don't want a settlement. I know. But I need you to understand what you're choosing. If we go to court, this becomes public record. Your father's reputation will take a hit. Devon's too. Since he's representing your father, knowing there are ethical problems with the case, your family will know you chose to expose them. They exposed themselves, I said. I'm just holding up the mirror. The mediation was set for December 18th at Dr. Chen's office. Neutral ground. I flew back to Toronto 2 days early, stayed in a hotel, couldn't sleep. The morning of the meeting, I threw up twice. Put on my best blazer, the one I usually saved for client presentations. Looked at myself in the mirror and thought about Uncle Thomas's painting. Light in the bones. I walked into that conference room like I was walking into battle. Dad sat at one end of the long table, his lawyer beside him, some silver-haired shark in a 3-piece suit. Devon sat on Dad's other side, looking uncomfortable for the first time in his life. Mom wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She'd chosen neutrality, which was just another word for cowardice. Dr. Chen sat beside me, her red briefcase on the table like a promise. "Emma," Dad said, his voice doing that warm, reasonable thing he used in courtrooms. "I'm glad you came. This has all gotten out of hand. We're family. We should be able to work this out like adults." "I agree," I said. "Adults don't file frivolous petitions claiming their dead brother was incompetent." His jaw tightened. Thomas was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. "We have 8 years of medical records saying otherwise," Dr. Chen said calmly. "Your brother was lucid, coherent, and very deliberate about his wishes until the day he died." "Doctor. Sarah Winters from Toronto General is prepared to testify to that effect." Dad's lawyer cleared his throat. "We're prepared to offer Miss Morrison a settlement. $200,000 in exchange for relinquishing all claims to the Morrison Holdings shares and signing a non-disclosure agreement regarding any alleged financial irregularities." I almost laughed. $200,000 for an $8 million stake? "The shares are in a privately held company," the lawyer continued smoothly. "They're not liquid. They don't generate significant dividends. Taking the cash settlement is far more practical. Or," Dr. Chen said, sliding a folder across the table, "Miss Morrison can retain her 30% ownership, exercise her rights as a shareholder to call for a full financial audit of Morrison Holdings, and let the board decide whether Mr. Robert Morrison should continue as CEO, given these documented irregularities." She opened the folder. Bank statements, email printouts, transaction records, years of them. Dad's face went white, then red, then a mottled purple I'd never seen before. "You're bluffing." "Thomas wouldn't have." "Your brother documented everything," Dr. Chen said. The personal charges to company credit cards. The contracts awarded to your golf buddies. The quarterly bonuses you voted yourself while freezing employee wages. Nothing illegal, technically. But I suspect the board would find it all very interesting. As would the Canada Revenue Agency. Devon leaned forward. Emma, you don't want to do this. Think about Mom. Think about the family reputation. This will destroy. You mean it'll destroy Dad's reputation, I said. The one he's spent 40 years building. The former Chief Justice who can't even manage a real estate company without playing fast and loose with other people's money. I built that company, Dad said, his voice shaking with rage. I took what my father left and turned it into something worth millions. Thomas contributed nothing. He abandoned the family, abandoned his responsibilities, to play artist in some warehouse. Those shares should have reverted to me. But they didn't, I said, because Uncle Thomas knew exactly what you'd do with them. He knew you'd use them to consolidate power, to make sure Devon inherited everything while I got nothing. He knew, because that's what you've been doing my entire life. That's not. Do you know what Devon's trust fund is worth? I looked at my brother. 3 million. Set up when he graduated law school. What's mine worth, Dad? Silence. There is no trust fund for me, is there? Because I chose graphic design. Because I'm too creative, too sensitive, too much like Uncle Thomas. Because I don't fit the Morrison brand. You had the same opportunities as your brother, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. I had different opportunities. Smaller ones. Quieter ones. The kind that come with conditions and strings attached. Devon got unconditional love and a $3 million trust fund. I got criticized and grounded at 30. Devon looked down at his hands. For half a second, I thought he might actually defend me. Then he cleared his throat and said, Emma, this is business. It's not personal. Everything is personal to you people, I said. That's the problem. Dr. Chen pulled out another document. We're prepared to go to court if necessary. But we're also willing to settle this reasonably. Miss Morrison will retain her 30% ownership. In exchange, she won't call for an immediate financial audit. However, she will be attending all board meetings going forward, and she will be reviewing all financial statements quarterly. Any future irregularities will result in immediate action. Dad's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. Dad shook his head, whispered back. They argued in hisses. Finally, Dad looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not disappointment. Defeat. Fine, he said. You want the shares? Keep them. But don't expect to be welcomed at family gatherings. Don't expect your mother and me to pretend this didn't happen. I don't expect anything from you anymore, Dad. That's the whole point. We signed papers. Dr. Chen witnessed. Devon wouldn't look at me. Dad stood up the moment it was done and walked out without another word. I sat there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. You did well, Dr. Chen said quietly. I just blew up my entire family. No, you just stopped letting them blow you up. I flew back to Vancouver that night. My apartment felt smaller somehow, or maybe I felt bigger. I made tea, stared out my window at the rain, checked my phone. One text from Mom, I hope you're happy. Nothing from Dad or Devon. But there was an email from Dr. Chen with the subject line, additional items from Thomas's estate. I opened it. Emma, forgot to mention at the meeting, probably for the best, given the tension. Your uncle also left you the mortgage-free title to a cabin on Galiano Island. He bought it 10 years ago as his retreat space. Said he always imagined you using it to paint. The keys are being couriered to your Vancouver address. LC. I cried then. Really cried. The kind of crying that feels like cracking open, like something hard and tight finally breaking loose. Uncle Thomas had seen me, really seen me. He'd spent 8 years quietly building a safety net, leaving me breadcrumbs to find my way out of the Morrison family maze. Not because he wanted revenge, because he wanted me to be free. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls, all from the same Vancouver number. I called it back. Morrison Holdings. How may I direct your call? This number called me repeatedly this morning. Please hold for Mr. Garrett Morrison. Wait, Garrett Morrison? That was Uncle Harold's son, my father's nephew, the cousin I barely knew because he'd been working in Morrison Holdings' Calgary office for the past decade. Emma? His voice was warm, relieved. Thank God you called back. I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. I'm the VP of Operations for Morrison Holdings, and I just got word about your share ownership. I wanted to reach out before you heard it from your father's side of things. Okay. I want you to know that not everyone in this company agrees with how your dad's been running things. There are 6 of us on the board, and at least 3 of us have been concerned about his financial decisions for years. But he's had majority control with his 30% plus your grandmother's 10% proxy, so we've been outvoted consistently. My pulse quickened. And now? Now you have 30%. Which means if you vote with the reform wing of the board, we have the majority. We can actually fix things, make this company what it should be. Why are you telling me this? He laughed, tired and genuine. Because your Uncle Thomas called me about 2 years before he died, told me what he was planning, asked me to watch out for you if anything happened to him, said you were the only Morrison with actual integrity left. I sat down hard on my couch. Uncle Thomas talked to you? We had coffee every few months. He knew I was frustrated with your dad's leadership. He was building you an alliance, Emma. People inside the company who would have your back. I don't know anything about commercial real estate. You don't need to. You need to know right from wrong and vote accordingly. The rest we can teach you. There's a board meeting next month. I'd really like you to be there. Not to fight. Just to listen. Meet people. See what the company actually does beyond your father's ego. I thought about Uncle Thomas's letter. Power to make choices. Power to walk away if you want to, or power to burn it all down if that's what you need. I'll be there, I said. Excellent. I'll send you the details. And Emma? Welcome to the family business. The real family business, not your father's version of it. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone in my apartment, working on a graphic design project for a small theater company, eating takeout pad thai, watching snow fall outside my window. Mom sent a card with no note inside. Devin posted Instagram photos of the Morrison family Christmas. Everyone gathered around the tree at my parents' West Vancouver house, smiling like nothing had changed. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. The Galiano Island cabin keys arrived December 27th. I took the ferry over on New Year's Eve, drove through the quiet island roads, found the place tucked into the trees overlooking the water. Small, cedar-shingled, perfect. Inside, Uncle Thomas had left everything ready. Art supplies in the studio room, books on the shelves, a note on the kitchen counter. The light is best in the mornings. Coffee's in the freezer. Make something beautiful. I made coffee, stood at the window, watched the last sunset of the year paint the water in shades of amber and rose. Then I set up an easel and started to paint. I painted for 6 hours straight, losing track of time, finding something I hadn't realized I'd lost. By the time I looked up, it was past midnight. New year, new life. My phone buzzed. Email from Garrett. Board meeting January 15th, 2 p.m., Vancouver office. Looking forward to meeting you in person. Another email from Dr. Chen. Your father withdrew his petition. Case closed. Congratulations. I sat on the cabin floor, covered in paint, and laughed until I cried. The board meeting was intimidating. 6 people in expensive suits in a downtown boardroom, huge windows overlooking False Creek. Garrett turned out to be in his early 40s, kind eyes, firm handshake. He introduced me to the others, 2 older women who ran property management divisions. A younger guy heading development, another VP I immediately forgot the name of. And my father, sitting at the head of the table, his face carefully neutral. Emma, he said. Glad you could join us. Wouldn't miss it. The meeting was 3 hours of financial reports, property assessments, development proposals. I understood maybe 40% of it. But I watched Dad's face whenever someone questioned his decisions. Watched him deflect. Watched him use his authority voice, his former judge intimidation tactics. And I watched Garrett and the two property management VPs push back. Politely. Firmly. When the meeting ended, Dad left immediately. Garrett walked me out. That wasn't so bad, was it? I barely understood half of what was discussed. You'll learn. Your uncle did his homework before buying into this company. It's not that complicated once you get the basics down. And honestly, we don't need you to be a real estate expert. We need you to be the vote that keeps your father honest. He hates me now, probably. But he also respects you more than he ever did. You stood up to him. Most people don't. I thought about that on the drive home. Respect without love, power without approval. It wasn't what I'd wanted as a little girl trying to impress my dad with crayon drawings. But it was what I needed as a 30-year-old woman trying to build an actual life. 3 months later, the company hired an external auditor at the board's request. Nothing criminal was found, but the auditor recommended significant policy changes around executive spending and contract approvals. Dad voted against the changes. The rest of the board voted for them. His face when the vote passed was a picture I'd keep forever. 6 months after that, Devin called me for the first time since the mediation. Emma, it's me. I know. Silence. Then, Dad's not doing well. He had a minor stroke last week. Mom wanted me to tell you. My stomach clenched. Is he okay? He'll recover. But it scared him. He's talking about retiring, handing over CEO duties to someone else. I think he realizes he can't control everything forever. Why are you telling me this? Because he won't. He's too proud. But I thought you should know. Devin, why did you help him try to take Uncle Thomas's shares from me? Long pause. Because that's what I've always done. Help Dad, back Dad up, be the son he needed. I didn't think about whether it was right. I just did what was expected. And now? Now I'm a 35-year-old lawyer who's never made a decision without checking with my father first. So I'm probably not the person to give life advice. Thank you for calling, I said, and meant it. Yeah, take care, Em. Dad didn't retire immediately, but he stepped back, let Garrett take over day-to-day operations, showed up to board meetings but didn't run them. He looked older suddenly, tired. I saw him at Uncle Harold's birthday party that summer, the first family gathering I'd attended in 8 months. He nodded at me across the room. I nodded back. We didn't speak. Mom cornered me by the dessert table. You could try to forgive him, you know. He's your father. I'm working on it, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean letting him hurt me again. She sighed. You're so stubborn, just like Thomas. I know, I said. Uncle Thomas told me that was a good thing. I started painting more. Took a month-long sabbatical from graphic design work, spent it at the Galliano cabin, creating. Some of it was terrible. Some of it was pretty good. All of it was mine. I had my first art show in September at a small gallery in Gastown. 20 paintings. Not huge, not fancy, but real. Devin came. Brought Rebecca, who turned out to be lovely and apparently had no idea about the 3 other women until I'd mentioned it. They'd worked it out. He'd gone to therapy. They'd postponed the wedding but stayed together. Mom came with Aunt Carol. Bought one of the paintings, the one of Morning Light on Water. Dad didn't come, but I got a card at my apartment 2 days after the show. Emma, your mother showed me photos. Your uncle would be proud. Dad, not an apology. Not an admission of anything. But more than I'd gotten in 30 years. I put the card on my fridge. A year later, I was painting in the cabin when my phone rang. Dr. Chen. Emma, I wanted to give you a heads up. Your father officially retired from Morrison Holdings last week. The board voted Garrett in as CEO, unanimously. How did Dad vote? He abstained. First time in 40 years he's abstained from a vote. I think he's finally letting go. That must be hard for him. Probably. But it's good for everyone else, including you. Garrett's already implementing some of the reforms Thomas had outlined in his notes. The company's in good hands. After we hung up, I stood at the cabin window, watching eagles circle over the water. Thought about control. about legacy, about the difference between building something that lasts and clinging to something until it crumbles. Uncle Thomas had left me more than money, or property, or shares. He'd left me a choice. The choice to either repeat the Morrison family pattern's control, favoritism, conditional love, or break them entirely. I chose to break them. Not with anger, not with revenge, just by living differently, by creating instead of controlling, by building bridges instead of walls, by loving people without conditions attached. The inheritance that changed my life wasn't the $8 million in shares, or the cabin, or the studio. It was the permission to be myself. The proof that I'd been worth the trouble all along. My father spent 40 years building an empire where he was king. Uncle Thomas spent 8 years quietly building me a kingdom where I could be free. I know which inheritance actually matters. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, the scapegoat child, the overlooked one, the one who never quite measured up, I want you to know something. You're not the problem. You never were. Sometimes the people who should love us unconditionally love us conditionally instead. Sometimes families are more concerned with appearances than truth. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from people who refuse to see you. And that's okay. It's painful and it's hard, and it'll crack you open in ways you didn't know were possible. But on the other side of that cracking is freedom. Real, messy, imperfect, beautiful freedom. You don't need anyone's permission to be who you are. You don't need anyone's approval to build a life that fits you. You don't need to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. The people who love you, really love you, will make room for all of you. The complicated parts, the creative parts, the parts that don't fit the family narrative. Everyone else? They're writing a story you were never meant to be in. So write your own story instead. Make it weird. Make it honest. Make it yours. And remember, the ones who try to dim your light are just afraid of their own darkness. You have every right to shine.